Hello, my little Luxes. Welcome back to another Luxy Charms, and I am your host, Charcy Lux. And today we are continuing on for the Critters ranking, or me just talking about the different Critter films before I get to the final part to this series. I've been doing this for a few months now, but I had originally done a ranking of the Leprechaun franchise for St. Patrick's Day and everything, and I just kind of came to the conclusion that, you know what, I think I want to do something very similar to that and just go through different horror franchises, and after going through different reviews of each individual film, I will go and rank my favorite to least favorite, or actually, you know what, I think it's better if you rank it from least to favorite. I mean, it really doesn't matter, but...
Get on with it! Yes, get on with it!
Okay, geez, I'll get on with it. God, some people just can't take a conversation sometimes. Anyway, like I said before, today I am going to be doing a movie review on Critters 4. So let's get into it by doing the usual spoiler alert. If you hate having spoilers to films you have never seen, this is your warning. And viewer discretion is advised. And this film was first released in 1992, and as I had previously stated in Critters 3, that Critters 3 and Critters 4 were filmed at the exact same time, and they had started the filming process in February of 1991, and had basically finished up with Critters 4 by July of 1991. And Critters 4 literally opens up exactly where Critters 3 left off, which was in the end credits, technically, where we get a glimpse of Charlie is going and he finds the last of the crate eggs that were in the basement of this apartment building. But before he goes to destroy the eggs, he has this weird alarm go off. But before Charlie can figure out what this strange alarm system really is, all of a sudden a holographic message of Ugg shows up, and he begins to explain to Charlie that he is forbidden from destroying these crate eggs because these two eggs are the very last of their kind, and if he destroys them, that the krites will forever be extinct. And that, according to the council, this is forbidden. This is exactly where we begin with Critters 4. It is the exact same explanation, but what we see happening is that the council sends this pod, and it comes crashing down into the basement with Charlie. Very strange. I mean, I want to know how it came crashing through how many floors of this apartment building, yet miraculously makes its way down to the basement. Maybe it came crashing in from the basement window. I don't know. Movie magic, details, we know how it goes. So, wouldn't you know it, Charlie sees that this pod has a couple of chambers for these eggs, so he crawls into this massive pill-looking, like, pod station and puts the eggs into their containers. But before he can leave, this pod starts doing a 15-second "we're going to take off" sequence. So Charlie goes to leave, but the door closes behind him. And next thing he knows, he's put to sleep, and he's shipped off into space along with the last two crate eggs. And he ends up floating into space for years. And come to find out, he's been floating out in the outer space universe for 53 years before the pod is finally found. Now, who is it that ends up being the miraculous heroes for Charlie and finally finding this pod that has been floating in space for so long? Why, it's a futuristic scavenging space crew, of course. So they come across this pod, and the captain, who is also known as Rick, decides that he wants to scrap this thing. He wants to collect it because he thinks he can sell it for money. But I mean, that's what a scavenger crew kind of does, is they go through space looking for wreckage and looking for things that they can make money off of. But Fran the pilot kind of has her doubts, and she kind of states forward how she feels about it, but she's kind of outvoted, so they decide to bring this strange looking pod, or this strange looking spacecraft, I guess they would think of it, onto the ship. And while they are investigating this thing, they come to find out that it has the symbol of the old original Intergalactic Space Council, which we kind of don't really have it fully explained if the council disintegrated, or if that's the right word, disbanded? Disbanded, maybe that's a better word. Or if the logo changed. But basically, from what we understand, is that Terra is now what that company once was when Ugg had first gotten a hold of Charlie. So the space crew, or I should say the Captain Rick, kind of sends out a signal to basically see if anybody is interested in this thing in order to collect money from it. And wouldn't you know it, TerraCore ends up reaching out to them, getting into contact with them. They are speaking with Council Tetra, who looks vaguely and oddly familiar. In fact, it's actually Ugg, performed by Terrence Mann. We don't know him as Ugg anymore. He presents himself as this Council Tetra, in charge of TerraCore, and he congratulates the crew and lets them know that this pod is very important to them. They've been looking for it for years, and that they give them coordinates to a station nearby, and that they will meet them there, and that they will be rewarded for finding this pod. The only stipulation is they are not to tamper with it in any way or form, and they're not supposed to open it. Of course, Rick wants to be very difficult at first, and thinks that he can basically bargain with TerraCore to see if he can get a higher price for it. But he is outvoted by the rest of the crew, where they basically just said, go with the deal, it's a good deal, you don't need more. So we kind of see that Rick is upset that the crew doesn't go with him at this first point, but regardless, they go to this station. They come to find out that it's completely abandoned, except for this really bad, faulty computer by the name of Angela that runs everything. And the more they keep trying to get answers from this computer system, they find out that she's very ass backwards about things.
According to Planetary was founded by Maximilian Rupert.
Cancel. Rick, the computer's fucked up.
Like, perfect example, you have Albert, a fun name when you think about it. It's Al and Bert. So Albert, he comes to realize, as he put it so eloquently, that the computer system is like his ex-wife, that you have to play reverse psychology on this thing, because if you want something done, she would fight you on it. So if you would tell her the opposite, she would end up doing it. So what ends up happening is he tells her, do not give me complete access to the computer systems, and she ends up doing that because she's going to do the opposite of what he asked for. The future of our computers might be very similar to this. We shall find out, especially since this is supposed to take place in 2045. Although there is a scene where Ethan, who is an apprentice engineer, is in his bunk and he's looking at a calendar because they're traveling until they get to Earth. And the date is different than what the opening had said. The date had said 2045. And later on, they even have conversations where they talk about it being 2045. But this calendar is completely off by like 300 years. A mess up, somebody who made the prop didn't realize what they had done, or it's a funny, silly goof. I'm not 100% entirely sure what that's about. Wouldn't you know it, before Terra Corps can make it to the station themselves, you have the Captain Rick, who still wants to get into this pod. He's still very selfish about it and wants to get to what's inside of the pod, even though he was told not to. After opening it, a very confused Charlie comes popping out of this pod. And it's just funny to note that he's disappointed when he realizes that he's back in space again. It's just one of those things to note that Charlie was more than happy to be back on Earth, apparently. But not only does Charlie come popping out of this pod, those 2 Krite eggs end up hatching as well, which kind of is a weird thing to note because Charlie at one point in time even states that it takes Krite eggs 6 months of incubation period before they can hatch, and technically they would have been like eggs that were only like a day or 2 old, that when all of them were put into this pod, they were put into a frozen sleep state. So they haven't aged in that amount of time they've been floating in space. Movie magic again, I guess?
Awkward.
But regardless of this weird blooper, the eggs hatch and the Krites go and attack Rick right away. So you have these baby Krites that are literally suffocating Rick, and you get this funny kill scene, and it's the first kill of the film. But before Charlie can take the opportunity to kill the Krites, they take off into the station and hide. So Charlie is introduced to Ethan's character, and Ethan, oddly enough, very similar to Leonardo DiCaprio's character from the previous film. It's just kind of another funny tie-in that they just found an actor that was very similar instead of just having Leo again. I don't know. I guess since it's 53 years later, it would have been a funny thing to find out, oh, maybe he was supposed to be an ancestor to that character, but missed opportunities. But anyway, so Charlie and Ethan team up and they go to hunt down these Krites. But while they're in the process of trying to hunt down these critters, they manage to meet back up with the rest of the crew. And that's when Charlie finds out that it's 53 years in the future, and that everybody he has known and loved in his life is now completely gone. But I should also back up a little bit and state that while Ethan and Charlie were investigating or hunting down the Krites, they found out that this station was for scientific purposes, and that they had created this machine that was supposed to be a species replicator. So, I mean, it's obviously foreshadowing for the Krites because, I mean, reproduce rapidly and grow rapidly. It's obvious where this machine idea was heading for the story plot. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Ultimately, this space station was completely abandoned because whatever was going on with their research had obviously proved to be faulty and didn't go anywhere. Well, that's probably because they didn't have the Krites, which is also why I'm kind of wondering if this is why Terra Corps wanted them to meet up at the station. It's never explained. I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's just also another loose end to this film type of idea. But I'm thinking about it now, so I might as well bring it up now. So as things keep going, the Krites have grown and they meet up with Bernie. He's in the pharmacy little area and thinks that he's going to be stealing all this medication. Instead, he gets killed and eaten by the Krites. So the rest of the crew all realize that they need to gather together and they need to just abandon this station. So the last of the survivors get together and travel down to their spaceship. But wouldn't you know it, there is a Krite on board that tries to attack them. Oddly enough, these Krites, absolutely none of them use their poison darts like they have in the previous 3 films. I don't know if it was a lack of budget, which would make sense because that's something I'm going to bring up later. Charlie ends up trying to shoot this Krite, and in doing so ends up shooting the ship as well. I mean, he gets his mark, but he also kills the ship.
But I got him.
They are now officially stuck there until TerraCore does come to the station. And that's usually how it goes for poor Charlie, that he just has really bad luck when it comes to these things. When TerraCore arrives, of course Charlie recognizes Ugg, but Ugg acts like he knows nothing about Charlie and doesn't recognize him. Everybody else knows him as Counselor Tetra, and it's been 53 years later. Regardless, Charlie knows this is Ugg, and he's still super excited to see his old friend. But Ugg is completely changed. He's not the same person. And in fact, he ends up even shooting and killing Albert in front of both Fran and Charlie. In Charlie's dismay is when he realizes that this isn't the friend that he once knew when they were bounty hunters together.
I guess you got a promotion, huh?
Things change, Charlie.
And Ethan, clearly being upset, was distraught because Albert was his father-like figure. So he goes to take his revenge on the TerraCore crew and leads them deeper into the ship while they're chasing him. But he uses the shitty-ass Angela computer to his advantage by basically doing the reverse psychology to get her to close doors and trap them until they are stuck in this scientific replica room. Because wouldn't you know it, Ethan had found out earlier that that's exactly where the Krites ended up going, so that they could replicate themselves and to have their children grow faster. So they get locked into this room with the Krites where they are killed off. And that's probably the scene that you get the most Krites going on. And it's kind of funny to note that the Chiodo brothers themselves call this film the Critters Light version. I'll go into what I was talking about before for the budget. As I have previously stated, that Critters 4 was simultaneously filmed at the same time as Critters 3. And the Chiodo brothers had stated that their budget was completely spent on the Krites and the puppeteering for Critters 3. So you got the fun, goofy side and the Critters parties that we are so familiar with, especially from Critters 2, but we don't get that in Critters 4. But that's because, like what they had said, the budget was spent. So they had to come up with creative ways of having less budget and way less critters. In fact, I'm sure the few critters that were there were just them reusing Krites that were from Critters 3, but they had to be careful about it so they weren't using the same ones completely. And I'm pretty sure most of them were kind of destroyed anyways because, they get pretty beat up when they're being killed on the film.
He's dead, Jim.
So that's also why there's a different tone to this Critters. It's not as lighthearted and as humorous as the previous 3. This one has a way darker tone. And you don't get as much fun with the Krites in that. Although they do come up with some really creative camera work in that, where one of the crew members had even explained that they had a critter ball that was attached before a camera and it would just spin and the camera would sit right behind it. So you get this little critter ball view with the camera work as this critter was going to attack people. We didn't get as many critter kills because they really only had 2 Krites to work with. They still have a lot of kills for the kill count in this one. There's 7 that technically die in this, not including all the Krites. So I think there's 8 Krites that end up dead, so only 8 Krites to the film. But anyway, I am off track again.
Get on with it!
Dear Lord, could you stop doing that? I will get on with the story here. So it leads back to where Ethan comes back and is distracting Counselor Tetra, Ugg, whatever you want to call him. He was Ugg at one point in time, and he even tells Charlie that things change. He does remember who Charlie is, so whatever happened in the 53 years must have had some major shit go down for Ugg to totally change his personality from what he once was. Granted, he's not human, so who knows exactly what his motives ever were, even when he was a bounty hunter. Granted, he at one point in time had considered Charlie a friend.
Good luck, Charlie, my friend.
Ethan is distracting Ugg by juggling eggs, which we had seen earlier in the movie that he had the talent for juggling. While he is distracted, Fran is able to take the weapon from Ethan. Instead of shooting Ugg, she smacks the shit out of him with the back end of the gun, which is still hilarious. But while he is knocked out, obviously the last remaining survivors of Fran, Ethan, and Charlie go to steal Ugg's ship from him, and we have a Krite that comes to attack Ethan, but the coolest critter kill of the entire film happens in this moment where Ethan freezes it, and then while it is completely frozen, he drop kicks it, and it shatters into 100 little pieces, which is a nice throwback to Terminator 2, which is ironic because it was at the exact same year that Terminators 2 had come out, was when Critters 4 came out. It was doing a friendly homage to that kill. But this film officially ends with the fact that Ugg wakes back up, threatens to kill Ethan, and you have to have the moment where Charlie realizes that he has to kill his old friend because he is a changed person and he's not the same Ugg that he once knew. Now, Ugg becoming an evil character was supposed to be some big plot twist that was thrown in there just to add another element to the film. But it didn't work for this film, and I can't really put my finger on it. It's just out of left wing. And for 53 years, we don't know exactly what happened and everything, but it just was a plot twist that didn't land. It didn't make its mark, which I think this is one of the many reasons why this is everybody's least favorite film of the franchise. And for the fact that Ugg is a loved character. I'll also state the fact that Charlie and Ugg are in all 4 films. So to have Ugg turn evil, it's either A, too predictable, or B, you just can't take a beloved character and make him so cold-hearted and so quickly. I don't know, it didn't land. It didn't feel right, and it didn't work.
Nope.
But we end this film with Ethan, Charlie, and Fran barely escaping from the station, because wouldn't you know it, its core was about to blow and go nuclear, because it'd been sitting there abandoned for how many years. But now is the point where it's going to blow up. So when they barely make their escape, and with the station blowing up, it will kill off the rest of the Krites on the station. So as far as we know, they should technically be extinct now. Right? Well, we now know 20 plus years later, we have another Critters film come out called Critters Attack. So I will be continuing on, and my next review will be talking about that film that is not related to the previous films. So I'm kind of intrigued to see. It will be a first watch for me. I just want to see what it's about.
Hey! I don't want to go nowhere!
Now, I had gotten a lot of facts from watching Space Madness, the making of Critters 4. I love watching behind the scenes information. I love going down those rabbit holes and just getting all the little nitty gritty information from everything. And then that's where you find out why this film was so different. Even though, yes, it was filmed at the same time as Critters 3, they put so much more budget into that one that by the time they got to the 4th one, they couldn't have the amount of critters that all the other ones had. It didn't have the lighthearted funness as the other ones did as well. So like I had previously stated, that the Chiodo brothers had helped with the critters' creation again, and that some of the critters that were on site most likely were from Critters 3, but they had to change them up enough so that nobody would recognize them. But otherwise, there was only 2 Krites that were used throughout the film. And most of the time they were off screen, and they didn't do their typical thing. Like I said, they didn't do the dart shooting and that kind of stuff. But they did have a nice throwback to Critters 2 with the scene where one of the bounty hunters shoots off the head of as I hit my little glasses, shoot off the top fuzzy part of the critter's head and he becomes bald. So we have another baldy in Critters 4, and I guess that's the way that you are able to tell apart the only two Krites that are on this film. But other than that, I mean, it was still great to still have the Chiodo brothers be a part of the monster creation. But what makes it up for me for this film, because I know a lot of people just dislike this film, whereas I'm on a different level with it where I still love the film. So, as I had stated before, it's going to be interesting when I do the ranking, because it's still with the understanding that I love this franchise. This is one of my favorite horror franchises. This is my ultimate comfort film franchise as well. And the only one behind it is Tremors. What makes it up for me is the cast that they have on this film. It's an amazing cast. You have Angela Bassett, who plays Fran, who's the pilot, and she's such a badass in this film. In fact, there's a scene where Rick is being a complete creep and thinks that he's gonna sneak in the shower with Fran's character, and she turns around and totally decks him hard in the face. So, I mean, props to her. I loved Angela's character. That heightens this film so much for me anyways. And speaking of Rick, he's played by Anders Hove, who is very famous for playing Radu, the vampire on Subspecies. And we have another famous horror star that is a part of this crew. Albert is played by Brad Dourif, and we know and love him for playing Chucky on the Child's Play franchise. Well, I mean, it also becomes Bride of Chucky, Seed of Chucky, Chucky, okay? It's Brad Dourif. And I loved his character in this. And it was cute seeing him have a father-like figure character with Ethan's character. And you also have Eric Dare, who was from Twin Peaks. And he was the one that was trying to get to the pills and was eaten by the Krites. Someone else who is well known. And of course, you have Don Keith Opper and Terrence Mann coming back to play their original roles. We know them and love them for being Charlie and Ugg, which, like I said, is probably why it doesn't land that Ugg becomes evil, because we love Ugg. Ugg's one of my favorite characters from the first and the second film, so... And like I said before, they're the only two to be returning to the entire franchise, except for the fifth film, as far as I know. Dee Wallace comes back for the fifth one, though, even though it's not related to any of the other films. We'll get back to you on that, we'll find out. Like I said, first time watch. And the only one that isn't well known, and I don't think he's done much of anything since this film, is Ethan's character. The one that is very lookalike to Leonardo DiCaprio, Paul Whitthorne. And like I said, I don't know that name. I think this is one of the few things he's done. I didn't do enough research, so maybe in my trivia I'll have some more information about him in my shorts and that. But regardless of that, the cast is what makes it up for me, especially with Brad Dourif and Angela Bassett in this. They were amazing, and I loved their characters. And I just wanted to throw in, I think and I bet that pod was made by the same people who had created the crappy computer on the station, Angela, because the pod didn't do what it was saying, because it had told Charlie when he first got into it that he had 15 seconds to evacuate the pod, but it closed the door right away and put him to sleep. And Angela was the exact same way, all the way to the bitter end of the film when she's doing her countdown and she blows up before her countdown is even done. Makes that joke at the end of, well, she never could do anything correctly anyway.
Figures. She couldn't tell time either.
Anyway, as always, I want to thank you so much for joining me here on another Lexi Charms. I don't have too much for finishing thoughts on this one due to the fact that I'm saving it for, as I've been saying on the other ones, for the very last one, when I start doing the ranking, I'll go into the nitty-gritty in that. If you would like to continue following me, please like and subscribe. I try to put out a new video every week. Life goes crazy sometimes, but anyway, if you'd like to follow me on my other social medias, there'll be a link in the description down below. And I am the afterlife of the party, and I would love for you to come join me in the afterlife of the party. And you can definitely do that by joining me on my Patreon. And I want to give a great big welcome to TechRex71. Thank you so much for joining me on my Patreon, and I'm happy to have you as a little Lux. And on the screen, you can see a shout out to my fellow afterlife party goers. So huge thank you and shout out to you for your help and support. And a special shout out to my ultimate Luxes. So a great big thank you to Kurt, Chris Bruner, LJ Christensen, and the No Pants Ninja. And always remember to slay, subscribe, like, and always be yourself. And until next time, keep your head up, look to the stars, and hope that the Krites aren't coming to get you. Bye!